Hi guys, this is GadgetMan404 and today I'm going to show you one way of how to change motors for the Hubsan X4 Desire, or another word, the H502e. I've pre I've got this ready because of this is what I was going to do. I've already done it once before and I've now got to change the motors back because I changed all the motors for 3.7 volt motors and it didn't work. Here's where you put the screws in: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you also take the feet off so you can see the pinions, etc. underneath, and that protects the actual LEDs, and blue LEDs at the front, red LEDs at the rear. And obviously you have to take the propellers off before you can unclip the canopy. But you also need to be aware the GPS module is situated in the top of the canopy, so you have to be careful on how you take them out. Now, as you can see, I've done a little aerial mod. The little aerial mod normally goes along the side, and this is the GPS module wires that I was just telling you about. They fit one on the left of the flight control board, one on the right. So when you take the lid off, the wires are quite stiff. So be careful that you don't pull them too hard, because you could pull those little plugs off the actual motherboard. And then you'll have a job having to take the motherboard off and resolder them back on, and all that kind of stuff. So that could be quite difficult. So just be careful when you're taking the lid off, or the canopy off, that you don't pull it too hard. As I say, the aerial that runs down the back, it runs on the inside of the left rear arm. It normally runs to the motor, and then the cable, the Corex or the Cortex or whatever you call it, runs up the arm of the motor. Well, I've actually found there's a hole underneath, and I've pushed it down through the hole, so when it's up in the air it should give better signal because it's actually outside the craft. But I don't know, because I haven't had a flight yet, because I've been waiting for a motor that I ordered on Monday, and it finally came today, Saturday. So I honestly thought I would get it quicker than that when I ordered it from England instead of ordering it from China. I wish I would have ordered it from China. It probably would have got here quicker, but there you go. So this is one way of how to change the motors, and this is how I have already done it, and this is my method to do it. This isn't the only way to do it, but this is how I've done it. So this is what I have done. Now, as you can see, the motors here, and there's like, that's where the shaft pin goes. There's a big cog at the bottom of that, and at the bottom of the motor there is a little cog like a pinion, and obviously the little cog turns the big cog, which then turns the propeller. Make sure that when you're putting the pinion back, that it is level with the top of the metal pin on the motor. Don't push it all the way down to the actual motor underneath of the motor, because what happens is that big cog pinion actually does move up and down a little bit. There's a bit of play, and then you might miss the cog, might slip off, and then it won't be turning anything. So I have already cut the wires to the motors, because then I'm going to show you how you can do it by putting them back on. So you have to unclip the housing, take the pinion or the big cog, and then you'll see the motor pinion. Now I've got a pair of scissors, and I found the easiest way is just to prise it from underneath, like so. This is a voiceover app, so this might not be in sync because I'm watching this video as I'm talking to try and do a voiceover basically. For some reason, when I did the video originally, it didn't record sound. So I'm having to voice over a video I made a few days ago. Now at the top, you see where my fingers are, there's little latches. You pull them apart, and then you need to push the motor with something like your nail from underneath, and then it just slides out. So I'm not going to feed the wires back down there because it's, it's just, I don't want to, just easier to get at the motors if they ever go. Then I just pull it out. So you keep pushing, and it will slide out quite easily. So that's it. That's one motor. That is a clockwise, as it's blue and red, and the anti-clockwise or counterclockwise is the black and white. Now put the cog back in and then put it all back together, then at least all the parts you've got are together so you don't lose things when you put it back together, because that's the biggest problem with this. It's keeping everything together so you don't lose anything. So I'm going to do this other motor similar to what I've just done. Now, how I've done this, and this is totally up to you, but the wires to the motors are very long. They're just joined seamlessly to the motors on the flight control board. But in reality, when you buy a new motor, you're going to get short cables. So when you take off your bad cable, cut them as short as you can, because then the wires are going to be long from the flight control board to the motor. And then when you go to solder them or twist them together, it will be a lot easier to do. You'll have more play with the wires, because sometimes when you snip in the wires, you accidentally cut through it, shortening it. So make these wires on the motor as short as you can, and that means the motors coming from the flight control board are going to be quite long, and then you've got a bit of play, and then use your scissors again to take off the pinion. Now when you put the pinions back on, you will find that there's a smooth side and a jagged side. Have to make sure the smooth side is to the bottom of the motor and the jagged side is facing the floor, like from underneath. So the rough will touch the rough and it will engage, and then it will work. If you do it the smooth side, I think you might have an issue. Again, pull apart and then just push a little pin with your nail or a pair of scissors or even a pen or a pencil or a penknife or a knife, and like I'm just using a pair of scissors, just push it out and pull it out, and that is clockwise. Well, that's a counterclockwise motor, or negative, so counterclockwise, I believe. Black and white is negative, blue and red positive, so clockwise. I've taken, excuse me, got a bit of a cough. I've taken the three motors out and I've replaced them with, these are the motors that I've actually already put, or I'm going to put back. These are the original motors that I took out and swapped for some other X4 motors, and I didn't get the results I wanted. It wouldn't fly. It would only fly for 30 odd seconds, and I was assuming that the motors that I was using were 3.7 volt motors, even though the same size, 20 mil, 5.8, etc. But as I say, they didn't work. Now I'm going to tell you something that's quite important. When you push these motors down, watch what I'm doing here. You have to make sure that the wires are, as you're looking at the motor shaft, the wires are to the left and to the right, diagonal, straight. If you have it like that, there is a little lug on the inside of the canopy, and that will catch the wires. What you have to do is have the wires like this, so the lug fits in the middle of them. It doesn't touch them, so that means that the wires are safe and they're okay. And then all you do is, when you're happy that you've got them in the right angle, then push it all the way down until these little things click back over the top of the motor. It's quite tricky, but it can be done. And if you just make sure that when you've done it afterwards, just make sure that the wires are, as as I said earlier on, that the wires are one either side at the top. Makes it a lot easier to fit back. As I said, the smooth side and a jagged side. The smooth side goes to the pin, but don't push it all the way to the bottom of the motor. Just push it until you feel the bottom of the pin with your nail, and then that is enough, because sometimes the other motor, the other cog, should I say, it moves. It's got a bit of play, and if that's all the way down and the other cog moves the other way, you could actually miss the cog in. It could come disengaged, and then it could fall out the sky or something like that. So I'm just adjusting that. I pushed it too far. I'm now pulling it back. Put the cog back in. You can grease the shaft of this if you want. You can grease it or you can oil it. And just make sure that everything turns nice and freely when it's in there. As I said, I'm explaining by doing this, that does move quite a bit, so have the cog as near the bottom of that little pin under the motor as possible. It's quite important that you do that. And just for ease, I'm not even going to solder these motor wires. I'm just going to twist them around white to white, black to black, and then individually insulate them. So that's how I'm going to do it. If you're happy, if your soldering skills are better than mine, then fine. You can do whatever you feels best for you. But me, knowing my soldering skills are pants, then I'm not going to bother to try. Again, so as you're looking at it from the top, you have clockwise rear left, counterclockwise rear right. So front left you should have another counterclockwise, and front right you should have another counterclockwise. Again, when you're pushing these wires in, just make sure that they are one either side of those little plastic lugs. That's something to gauge for. If you can get one of those wires in there, as I'm showing you now, I don't know, this camera is great camera, but it doesn't have autofocus. So you can see that little plastic lug that touches the top of the motor, and if you have the wires the other way round, they're going to get trapped under that little lug. So that's why you have it turned the other way, and you have one wire either side of that lug, and that just keeps the motor from coming up when it's all fastened in. So it works, it does. That's the purpose of the design. That's how it's designed. I've noticed that the wires are one either side of that, so that's what you need to do, really. You want to keep doing as it is being done. I won't be soldering, as I said. I'm going to be I'm just literally, I've cut the wires quite long, and then I'm just going to twist them together, and then leave it, and then just individually wrap it with isolation tape or whatever. So I'm trying to zoom in here to show you what I'm trying to do. That is the motor that I need to replace, the rear left. That has come today. Or that's the front right, actually. I'm looking at it from the other way. The wires are very, very thin, and you need to make sure that when you have done your soldering, etc., each wire like this needs to be either side of that little shoe, because a screw comes through that hole, and if you have those wires near that hole, it's going to cut through the cables, it's going to short them out, and then you're not going to get any propulsion. You're not going to get the power and lift that this quadcopter can do and does effortlessly. It ain't gonna work. So just be careful. Make sure that all the wires in the middle as best as you can, and there's little latches. and just push the wires in them latches and just make sure that they're not catching anything, they're not covering up any holes, any lugs, because when you clamp the top on and you connect the wires for the GPS module, etc., you have to make sure you don't catch any wires. I've done this now 2 or 3 times, and every single time I've put it back together, I've either caught a wire or I've actually ended up putting a screw through. And then the last time I put it together, for that reason, I didn't even screw it together. I just thought I would tape round it. It's very lightweight, very sturdy. You could put the screws in the middle, those two top corners there, and at the bottom corner, and then just put tape around the bottom of this arm. But just make sure that when you do it, that nothing is trapping. You know, there's the aerial mods that I've been telling you about. The wire normally runs to this motor here and goes up the shaft of the motor. So I've pushed the wire in back a little bit into the base of the arm and having it facing down. I've also done a little mod on the transmitter, and that is, excuse me, that what I've done there is I've actually taken the transmitter apart. The aerial for the transmitter is sort of inside, and what it's trying to do is it's trying to push a signal through plastic, which might be why it's not getting so far. So I've got the aerial now on the outside of the transmitter. As you can see, my camera is a Wi-Fi camera. I'm using the Weemius action camera, and because it's Wi-Fi, I've paired it up to my iPad, and then I can use my iPad as a monitor so I know if I'm in shot or not. So that is, I don't even know why I'm doing that little maneuver there. And because I've lost the original audio, I'm trying to add sound to the video after the fact, and I don't even know why I just did that maneuver, but I don't even know why I keep moving it away. It doesn't make sense even to me, and I'm bloody doing it. But in conclusion, when you put the motors back in, just make sure that the wires are not covering up any holes. There are pins, little grabbers. Make sure the wires, as best they can, run down the middle, and when you come to the feet or the motor housings, spread each wire, put one either side of those feet, so when you screw it back together, you're not going to catch the wires with screws, because I've done that every single time. Leave the wires long. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give me a thumbs down. And as always, give me a reason why you don't like it. I'm now using a Windows phone, and I can't get the YouTube Studio app, which lets you look at all your comments. So I'm only getting my comments whenever you guys send me an email, and my internet isn't on all the time because I don't want it to drain the battery because it's 4G. So that is why I'm doing that.